I'm here today with Dr. Hehimetu Enkamit to discuss his book, Yes, We Cancer, If I Had to Do It All Over Again. Dr. Enkamit has a doctorate of philosophy in African art and culture, as well as a master's in education from Howard and a master's in African American studies from Howard. And his book chronicles his journey from his diagnosis with stage 3 prostate cancer in February of 2021 to today, where his cancer is non-detectable as determined by his PSA. And I'm going to read a little bit from the back of his book to give you a little bit more information. Already a vegan, upon receiving his diagnosis, he transformed his diet and lifestyle and engaged in alternative therapies, which enabled Dr. Enkamit to reduce both the tumor size and PSA number by more than 50% in 6 months.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I think cancer has to be looked at from an environmental perspective, meaning that everything in the environment can contribute to cancer. I used to have the idea that cancer was a result of one item, like smoking equals lung cancer. In researching for the book, I've discovered that everything in the environment can contribute, a little bit to the problem that we might have. Some things are major contributions, other things may be smaller, but still they add up. These points add up. And so I wrote the book to share this knowledge with the world that, as Dr. Francis Collins says, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. I have 4 people, my father, both my grandparents, my grandfathers, my brother and my father all died from cancer. So I just thought that genetics was a part of my process, but the environment I've lived in has also contributed greatly. And as we all know, the environment's very toxic. The water we drink is toxic. Air we breathe is toxic. The foods we eat are toxic. And all this is based on chemical processes that are generated by the industry. But there's also things that we can do to eliminate the toxicity in the environment. Things like looking to organic food, things like getting air purifiers in our home, things like water purifiers in our home, things like eliminating the environmental toxins that come from the EMFs in the environment, RF frequencies, cell phones, etc. So I used to carry 2 cell phones in my pocket, willy-nilly just years ago. But I realized that now that's potential contributor to environmental factors that can cause disease. So I've stopped doing that. And then more importantly, equally importantly, what I learned was that these devices, these RF frequency devices, cell phones, Wi-Fi, etc., are all used as element from the cargo called coltan and cobalt. And when I researched this, I found out that, as they say, over 6 million people died from wars, etc., to fuel the conflict, to enable us to have this cobalt and coltan in our environment. So I started looking at that and said, well, here I am contributing to the destruction of African people. I'm contributing to, they say that perhaps 2 children died so I can have this cell phone in my pocket. So I started looking at, well, maybe I should buy refurbished phones as opposed to invest in new phones. Maybe I should look at reducing the environmental factors for Wi-Fi in my house with the cable connections. There's a lot of things that are going on in the environment that we need to take care of, look at, to protect ourselves from cancer and other problems that we have in our life.
Because you had 2 phones in your pocket. You're saying 2.
I used to walk around with 2 phones in my pocket for about 8 or 9 years before I met you, actually. And you started talking about phone radiation. So from the early cell phones to probably we met about 6, 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. Until that time, I was kind of willy-nilly in terms of cell phones. Not that that caused my cancer, I can't say that, but it definitely didn't help my cancer possibly contribute something to cancer. So people need to be mindful of how we interact with our environment. The main point I'm trying to say, that the environment contributes greatly to all kinds of illnesses, including cancer. We can do things to protect ourselves from our environment by limiting Wi-Fi radiation in our homes. Cut the Wi-Fi off. My device called, it works with power over Ethernet, which gives us the ability to have the internet in our home without the Wi-Fi exposure. If we use cell phones, we use on speakerphone. Shouldn't carry them in our pockets. Shouldn't talk them to our head. We should use speakerphone to use cell phone. Because it tells us that the phone should be kept at least an inch from our bodies. But nobody tells us that when we buy the phone, some of a lot of people still carry it in their pockets. So cell phone, Wi-Fi, baby monitors, anything that has a wireless connection is potentially dangerous. And we need to be mindful of that. Not only is it potentially dangerous to us, it's causing havoc in the Congo. The people who live there, they produce these minerals for us, have these devices.
There have been laws that in different states where they've been trying to put forward like the right to repair laws so that we can repair phones and devices instead of always having to buy new, which I just heard in Massachusetts, they're not able to move forward because the industries themselves are blocking that. These devices are planned to be obsolete so that you have to keep buying new ones, and they don't even want there to be information on how to repair them. Some phones are made so that you literally can't repair them. Actually, you have to buy new ones for some Apple phones.
So we have to educate our people to know that you can buy refurbished phones that work perfectly well, and tell people that we no longer want to buy the new phones. We no longer want the blood phone. I label it in my book blood phone because that's what it is. Because the people had these phones. The diamonds was the thing back in the 80s, 70s, back 2000, whatever it was. So the blood phones, because they were messed up through the blood phones that caused the conflict in the Congo, and people were dying, children dying. So we had these phones, 4,000 or 5,000 people a month. And that's just the extraction of minerals. It's not talking about the environmental health factors of the people who are doing the mine themselves. Because to get the coltan and the cobalt out of the ore, use mercury. And mercury is a very toxic substance. Mercury is a very carcinogenic substance. So people are going to die from the fighting, from the child labor, from the war, from the environmental toxins of extracting the minerals, and from the toxins of themselves. We're talking about children as young as 7 years old are forced in the mine in the Congo today. So this is a huge problem.
Also, there's the e-waste, and there's the recycling, quote unquote, recycling that goes on of these products. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of people burning charging cords in order to pull the metal, and they're there in the middle of that smoke. You know, these young men, right, are young men who are the future, and they are inhaling this poison. And, you know, how many chargers do we need? Well, we need 1 million, because every new device that comes out has a new charging port, and then we have to get a new charge. And just all of this waste is, it's obscene.
Yeah. I think in my book, I gave statistics on the number of cell phones versus number of people. And I think there's more cell phones in the world than people now.
I heard, and more than toilets.
Yeah.
People don't have toilets, but they have phones. They don't have clean water, but they have more than one phone.
Unfortunately, it's become a way of doing business and surviving in the world. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So we can just have to make it better. There's nothing wrong with the phone itself. It's how the phone is produced and how the phone is used. That's the problem. We have to work on improving production and improving use. That's how we can each contribute to the process. Buying recycled phones, buying refurbished phones, one that's working on production and using smartphone the smart way, keeping away from our bodies, etc. Using the smartphone the smart way is one, being smart about how you talk on the phone. Don't put it to your head. Talk on the speakerphone. Fast, one of the fastest growing cancers in young people today is brain cancer. Could be from cell phone use, I don't know. Smartphone the smart way. Charging the phone, don't talk on the phone while you're charging it, because it generates electric and increases the amount of electric frequency, and these things explode to dangerous people. And keep it when you go to bed, use the smartphone smart way. Put the phone away from your body. Put the phone in the next room while you're sleeping. Cut the Wi-Fi off at night. You're not on your computer, cut the Wi-Fi off at night. Put the phone in another room. If it rings, you can hear it, but you're not bombarding your body with Wi-Fi radiation all night long, which interferes with people's sleep. These are all the ways you can use a smartphone the smart way. Even though I had prostate cancer, there's processes and techniques in the book that help anybody with any kind of cancer. It's not limited to prostate cancer. But prostate cancer is a huge problem for men. It's a number 2 in terms of people cancer deaths in men. And men is prostate cancer. Number 5 in everybody in the U.S. Number 5, prostate cancer. Number 5th cause of death in the U.S. for everyone. Number 2 for men. And black men twice as likely to die of prostate cancer than white men, which means that out of every 3 people dying of prostate cancer, 2 of those people are black. Serious problem. Prostate cancer is a huge problem, but we can do something to mitigate that problem. Go get checkup. I had stage 3 prostate cancer when I got checked. And my wife now says I go to the doctor. I might not be here tomorrow. Because it could have involved in stage 4. Stage 3 means that prostate cancer had expanded outside the prostate area into the similar areas, but outside the prostate, but it's still the general area of the prostate. And it had metastasized to the whole body yet. So had I not caught it then, I could be in more serious problem today. So, but had I caught it earlier on, because that men have to go to the doctor, they have to get checked, they have to get the PSA checked, they have to get they have the digital check. You have to do these things. Men, unfortunately, don't go to the doctor often enough. And my wife had this at heart. Had she not forced me to go to the doctor, I might not be here today. Because I was vegan, clean diet, etc. So I couldn't be cancer, but it was. It is. So I wrote the book in 3 parts. First part of the book is what to do if you get diagnosed, things you need to do if you get diagnosed with cancer. First chapter. Second chapter is I'm 25 years old. I have not received my diagnosis. Things I need to do to protect myself and preserve my future. And third part of the book is my personal journey with my cancer. So there's something here for everybody. It's just not about prostate cancer. It's just not about men. It's something about cancer for everyone.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank you so much for everything you've done to raise awareness on this issue related to technology, the life cycle of our phones, which most people aren't aware of, and also for writing this book where you talk about the steps that you took and your journey. I wonder if we could go into your thoughts on pesticides and chemicals in our food.
Tremendous problem. And unfortunately, the industry is pushing it. I personally only eat organic foods now. Only organic foods. Because, and then still you don't know if it's pesticides in the foods. You just don't know. But at least you know it's certified organic. So you're eliminating the problem. There's something called Dirty Dozen that produces this every year of the 12 most toxic foods in the environment. And things like greens are always at the top of this. They spray the pesticides on glyphosate, et cetera, on the greens. And you just can't wash it away. So I encourage people to buy organic foods, to eliminate glyphosate, to stop spraying Roundup in your yard. All that contributes to the toxicity in the environment. It runs off in the water, runs off into the oceans, into rivers. Rivers become toxic. We drink the toxic water, etc. It's just a huge problem. Flint, Michigan is not the only problem we have in water. Flint is not the only problem we have with water. And a lot of the water that, even though the federal government says it's safe, they've documented that it causes cancer. Toxins in the water. If you ever had cancer, you will understand that the expense is something that's relative. If I had taken a few more dollars years ago, invested in something organic or whatever, it may save me thousands of dollars a day for treatments and cures, treatments and different things like deal with cancer. So it's all relative. You pay now, you pay later. And we got to look at it from this perspective of what can I do to protect myself, protect my family, mitigate against these potential problems. Because ultimately, they say 1 in 3 people in America will be diagnosed with cancer in a lifetime. 1 out of 3 people in America will be diagnosed with cancer in a lifetime. So we're going to deal with it either today or tomorrow. Our choice. When I look back when I first got diagnosis, you begin to think back on your life. What are the things that you would have done better with your life, with your children, etc. So when I first started thinking about doing this book, I thought about what's the information I want to pass on to my children? What do I want them to know they may be able to change in their lives today, that they will be able to mitigate against future impacts of cancer? Because they're genetically, they're predisposition to have it, because I've had it, and other people in my family have had it. So that was my primary emphasis. So I began to think about my children, I started about my parents and information that they shared with me when I was younger, not about health, but other things that contribute to the kind of person I am today. I said I want to share these things with my children's age, people in my children's age group, and younger people, and those other people who maybe are my age, but have lived through some experiences I've had, but didn't enable us to share with our children, make a world a better place tomorrow. So that was the goal. The goal is to put out something today that can impact tomorrow's children, tomorrow's future.
You talk about meditation and exercise.
Yes, not only that, but there's also a lady named Khadijah Green, Dr. Khadijah Green, who has developed a process to kill cancer cells where they live without any toxicity. She was a nanophysicist. She was trying to improve the nanophysics of platform in terms of electronics, etc. But someone in her family got cancer. So she said, well, I have this PhD in this technology. And my parents, my aunt, I think it was her aunt, was dying of cancer. I can't do anything before. So how can I use what I know to help this process? She built this process called the Orally.org Foundation, where she's trying to raise funds to raise money to do clinical trials to show people that cancer cells can be destroyed through nanotechnology. Well, as a part of her program, she talks about her personal life and how she also eats organic foods, she meditates, she exercises, etc. And stress, we know, is a great contributor to everyone's life. Illness in our life, all kinds of illnesses. So meditation is a way of reducing stress. Exercise has been shown to reduce the risk of cancer and all kinds of cancers. So meditation and exercise are very important for preventative as well as treatment of cancer people.
When you were diagnosed, were you shocked?
Yes, very shocked. Because again, I've been vegan since 1975.
Since 1975.
I was exercising, I was doing meditation, I was doing all these things. But genetics and sugar, high sugar and other factors contribute to my cancer. I have to say that. I don't know what I can specifically say what contributed, but genetics laid the foundation and the environment contributes to my cancer. So yeah, I was shocked. that started me thinking about my life and all the things that contribute. And as I was researching all the different potential cancer-causing agents in the environment, and look at that and saying, even though I've been living a good lifestyle, I thought healthy lifestyle, these are the factors I have to mitigate to get rid of things from my life. And I started thinking about the environment, the economics of it all, and the role insurance plays, and the role of generational transformation of wealth plays, and all these things that I've been looking at, but I had to look at in terms of how can I help impact, protect my generation, my future generation, my children and my grandchildren from this impact. So I said, I gotta write this book. In 1969, I went to Howard University. At that point, I wanted to be an accountant. But at Howard during that time, there was a great awareness, awakening of Black culture, Black sensitivity. So I began to learn about Black history, Black culture in Africa as a byproduct. So I changed my major to African American Studies. So I graduated the first graduating class of African American Studies at Howard University in 1972. And since that point, I wanted to do a PhD in African culture and African studies. But I had children, and PhDs were very expensive, so I did a master's in education. So I taught for a period of time as well, taught social studies, etc. I still want to do this PhD in African studies because at that point my life was committed to becoming a part of and imparting, learning as much as I could about Africa, its traditions and culture, because it's my tradition and culture as well. In 1982, I called Shechem, Dr. Ron Nephron I. He's the king of our society, Auser Society. I became a member of Auser in 1985. And so he was the spiritual guide. He is the spiritual guide for our community. So I called him and asked him if he could give me an African name. Up to that point, I've been called Lee Cook, which is my given name. And I was going to give a talk that evening at a Kwanzaa event here in DC. And I said, I'd done this talk every year for several years. But I said, this year, it just hit me. I could no longer talk as Lee Cook. I had to talk as somebody African. So I called him, he gave me a name. That day, he gave me a name. So that's the name I use today. So I started doing names for people. And so Shechem suggests I write a book about African names. So my first book that's my second book. My first book was published. It's no longer in print. It's a collection of poetry. It's called The Itango Speaks. Itango is a term for God in the South African Zulu language. So my second book was African Names, the ancient Egyptian keys to unlocking power and destiny. That book was published in 1993, I think, something like that. And at that process, in this book, I developed a process, I explained the process on how many African cultures go about naming their children and the thoughts and the spiritual practices that go into naming a child. Names just not pulled out of the blue, so to speak, but there's a spiritual meaning behind the names. And so I'm going through the whole process in that book itself. So I was teaching, I started charter school in 2000 here in DC. And in 2006, we had a conference. And the conference dealt with African culture. So we invited people from Africa to come over and share their traditions. So I met a brother in 2006 when I went to Ghana, took tours of Ghana all the time. And a daughter I adopted in Ghana in 1980, 85, 86, 87, something like that. I adopted a young lady. She's about 8 years old. So I helped her to school in Ghana. I brought her to the US. She finished school here in the US in 2000 at UCC, and a good master's degree. She went back to Ghana, and her uncle, I met him when I was in 2005 on a tour in Ghana. He was working at a university, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. At that point, I met him, we talked, and so he was doing research in African culture at the university. So I invited him to come over and share with his traditions. So he presented his conference. We were in my office in the school, and I was telling him how I wanted to do a PhD in African studies. I didn't want to do the traditional route where I go to classes and all that whole thing. I wanted to just find a program where I could focus on my thesis, because that's something I wanted to say. I knew I wanted to say, and I wanted to say it. I found a program here in the U.S. in Oxford called, used to be called Union Graduate School. I think it's called something else. I forget what it's called today. It's part of Antioch, part of the Antioch system. But it was too expensive again. And I had children in school and debt, etc. So anyway, we were talking. He said, we have a program like that at Hehimetu University in Kumasi. I said, wow. So one thing led to another. He helped me get enrolled in the university. So I started my program there in 2008. I finished my thesis in 2015, I think. So I graduated in 2016, 15, 16, something like that. And I published my book, which I finished my thesis. And I published my thesis, which is called The Divine Kingship, a model for sustainable development of self and community. Divine Kingship of Santi, that is, Santi. A model for sustainable development of self and community. And that's based on years of engagement with the Asante community. My first trip to Africa was in 1985. And we went there at an invitation of the Asante King at that point. And since 1985 to today, I've been very much engaged with Asante culture and learning the tradition of Asante tradition. So when I did my thesis, I did it on the culture. I published it. So that was my second published book. It's published in print now today. And this book here, Yes We Cancer, is my third print book that's in print today. I have two other books that come out soon, which are dealing with other parts of my story. As a model for this process, there's a place in Benin called the Songhai Center. And the Songhai Center is a completely sustainable community. They do everything themselves. They generate their own energy, make their own machinery, grow tons of organic food, completely self-sustainable. And it's there in Africa. Songhai, I always take people to Benin. Benin want to go to Ghana. I always take people to Benin to visit Songhai so they can see the potential that the world has. People talk about sustainable development. But in Benin, in West Africa, they're living sustainably right now. It's created by a man named Dr. Father Godfrey Nzamujo. He's Nigerian by birth. He has several doctorates. He used to teach science at track satellites to space at University of California. And he's a priest, also a Catholic priest. He's Jesuit priest. And one day, it was during the 70s, there was a famine in Africa. And he said, here I am living in California. I'm living a comfortable life. And people at home are dying. I gotta go home and do something. So in 1985, he resigned his commission at the University of California, moved to Benin, shipped a bunch of stuff to start something. He had no resources. His crate got lost. So he got there, he had nothing. He pressed the government to give some land. They gave him 1 acre of land. He talks about there was nothing there but snakes and thieves. Today the place is an oasis. He has 7 or 8 centers in Songhai, Benin. He has 5 centers in Benin, in Nigeria, 2 or 3 centers in other countries in Africa. The place is phenomenal. You gotta go to Songhai to see this place in action. And Father Godfrey Nzamujo has become a great friend of mine. I've been trying to get Songhai in Ghana since 2000. I first visited Songhai. And we're gonna start this summer. I'm taking a tour, a group in October to Benin and Ghana. As a part of this group, a local musician named Ayana Gregory is going with me. And we're gonna do concerts throughout Ghana. And the money we raise for these concerts is gonna be used to fund people to go to Benin to study, to start this process. I realized something. I've tried going the governmental route, try to go the private route. And unfortunately, a lot of things in life, if you want to do it, you got to do it yourself. So I'm committing myself to raising money, start the process in Ghana. We'll start in October. So I talked about that in my book about development of the environment. Because the environment is very important in terms of sustainable development. We talked earlier about how the destroying the environment in the Congo, to force mining these minerals, and the forced conflict, how people are dying to get these minerals for us to have these devices. So the environment is very important. We have to protect our environment. I'm glad that the Environmental Health Trust has its focus on environment that we can support and protect and help us all live a long, protected life. The environment is critical. I repeat, genetics slows the gun, the environment pulls the trigger.